This is me, and that is the shadow of the guy who put me in this position. Hi, I have weird dreams that often turn into straight up fantasy novels. I'm going to tell you about this particularly insane one in this video. Everyone has dreams, but not everyone remembers them. Oftentimes those dreams are straight up nonsense, like most of mine are. However, I've had several startlingly real and freakish dreams for many years now, and what's the point of having dreams if you ain't gonna share 'em? This particular dream turned from a fever trip into a slightly more cohesive storyline. I'm gonna scrap the first bit and tell you about the interesting bits, since it's still the most vivid to me. It started out in a land of floating isles, with boats that moved through rivers of cloud. The boats had giant rudders, more like strange fans on the backs. I was in one of the boats, heading for one of the largest land masses. I was from the below grounds, and the people controlling the boats were native to these floating lands, and they wore robes of white. Oh, also, if I forgot to say, I'm a young man in this dream, for some reason, and I was tall, for once. I'm not myself, I'm a guy. I remember there being tension all around. Many people were boarding and leaving boats on this particular island, and many of them looked very unhappy, or afraid, or angered. All of them were dressed like me, so as though they lived on the earth below the floating islands, not in the white of the island dwellers. There was an arena built into the center of the island. I remember hearing angry voices and the dirt crunching under my feet and grass whispering in the slight breeze. There was always wind up there. I remember feeling memories that weren't mine, something about knowing why there was so much tension. I believe there was war brewing, and the outcome of whatever was going to happen in this arena would determine how the disagreement would sort out. I was being pressed on all sides by people, and I ended up near the front, close to the arena. In the arena now stood a strong-looking man, with long, platinum hair and eyes that were sunken pits of black. Like the entire white and iris, everything was just void darkness. His adversary was a girl, also blonde and dressed in white or red, I can't remember. As I watched, the guy with the platinum hair ready to warhammer, and it looked a lot like Thor's warhammer, and a single yellow iris rolled to the front of one eye, as though it had been looking into the back of his skull for some reason. And then the battle began. It seemed like the voices and the shouting of the crowd and the sounds of battle dimmed all of a sudden. Everything seemed off. I frowned and kind of turned to go see what was wrong, elbowing my way to the back of the crowd. The land was warping at one side, transforming into a steep downward angle, where people ran about at the bottom. It was odd. The rock that led down to this ravine that was forming was smooth and dark, like lava rock, and it looked like it would hurt to fall down. And then something tripped me, and I promptly fell down the rocks. I was skidding and sliding, and in my panic, I kind of flipped onto my stomach I just kept falling faster and faster, tumbling and rolling, and I was trying to dig my nails and elbows into the rocks, and it didn't work. It only, tore up the skin and my fingertips, and I remember watching as ridges were being carved, into the dirt as I scratched at the ground to try and stop myself. There were ridges leading from my fingers. I fell and slid faster and faster, looking down to see the ground warping again into a yawning, cave. And I tumbled in and hit the ground really, really hard on my side. Everything was dark and cold and painful in this particular, cave thing. The ground was rough, and I remember it pressing against my cheek and scraping against it, and I could feel small stones digging into my ribs, scraping my legs. And my side was in pretty bad shape. I think I hit some sort of sharp rock. The pain was almost like a vice. Everything was really, really dark, but there was a choked beam of light coming from where I'd fallen. Then there was a scrape of a foot against stone, and a step, and a breath. And I realized I wasn't alone. I tried to lay as still as I could, barely breathing, face down, and I opened my eyes a tiny bit. I was kind of laying too stiffly to truly make anyone think I'd passed out, which I only realized later, till it was too late. I remember seeing legs, and they were oddly shaped, kind of standing in front of me, as though the person was looming over me. And I saw the end of a staff. There was this aura about this thing, this creature that just screamed, "Danger, danger." And he chuckled, kind of He made like this chuckling noise, low chuckle, and paced to my right, out of sight, murmuring something in a low tone that I couldn't hear. I tried to pretend like I was still unconscious or dead, and tried to ignore the voice. He spoke again, saying, "I know you're awake." And after that, I coughed, kinda, and slumped a little bit from being so stiff, and I was gasping from holding my breath, trying to pretend I was knocked out. And he talked again, and his voice was very low and calm, as though he was completely in control of the situation, of me, of everything, all of his surroundings around him. He said, "On your feet." It was sort of intense. Everything was hurt. I have felt pain in my dreams before, lots of pain, and I could very much feel it now. Everything was still very much hurt from that tumble. But I managed to get at least to my knees trying to rise, and I was still very clumsy and disoriented. I noticed that as I was trying to rise, he was actually kind of short, which would be funny, but literally everything about him screamed, like, "I am dangerous, get away from me." Even on my knees, I was almost his height, and inwardly I didn't think he'd want me towering over him, and I desperately did not want to anger this creature of darkness. And he talked again as I got to my knees, and he was like, "I can tell you're a terrible listener." And then his hands shot forward and grasped the front of my shirt, yanking my face closer to his as he shouted, "I said on your feet!" It was kind of cool. Clumsy as I was, I still stinking clumsy, I obeyed and scrambled up the last bit. I was breathing hard, glancing around a little. My hand was still kind of pressed to my side because I could feel the pain and I think a little bit of blood there, and he was still holding onto my shirt, so I was like in this awkward hunched position on my feet, and he kept my face near his. His voice started warping and blurring, and I think I was losing focus from the blood loss or the pain. He was speaking to me something about how not all of it was an illusion, and something about my friends abandoning me, soldiers turning against their people. But reality kind of faded into darkness, and somehow his name got into my head. His name was Ruin. Then he kind of roughly tossed me into a very dark portal that opened up behind me, and I appeared on a ship, kind of fell. I remember the wood planks hitting my knees, kind of bruising some more, and they were creaking, and people kind of exclaimed in surprise as I looked up, all shocked and worried. I managed to stumble up and look around. We were in the middle of one of the river routes, the Rivers of Cloud. I thought it was another trick, but as I looked out over the port side, I saw him, Ruin, standing at the edge of a cliff, and his white robes were really stark against, like, how dark his skin was. It was kind of cool. And it blended with the clouds, and it was waving in the wind a bit. I was staring, and he looked up and vanished. And at about then, the dream ended. That, or it dissolved into nothingness, and I don't really remember what else happened, but that's about it. I think I woke up after recovering on the ship a little bit. What do you think? Should I do more dream videos? Please take your fanciest dagger and stab the like button, then use it to slice the subscribe button if you will.